Welcome to the podcast, everyone, and especially welcome Brenda and Lila. Thank you so much for being here. I cannot express enough gratitude because I am just so looking forward to this conversation, and it's so rare to be able to have conversations like this, especially publicly, where other people can listen and engage and really hear each other go back and forth with like opposing views. So thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Me too. In 2 minutes or less, explain your position and why you are pro-choice or pro-life.
Well, I'm 100% pro-life because I think all human life is precious and deserves protection. Whether you're an unborn child or you're an adult or you're an elder, you deserve protection legally and you deserve to be embraced by society. And I also think that the bonds of love that connect us are some of the most precious things in the world, and the bond of love between a mother and her child should be protected and supported and never pushed towards violence, especially against that unborn child. I also believe that abortion is not the solution to any problem that a woman faces. I mean, I believe in a bodily autonomy. I think that's very important. You mentioned reproductive rights, Brenda, and I agree. We have reproductive rights as human beings, but when there's a child that's already been reproduced, reproduction has already taken place. Now it's a question of human rights for that child as well as human rights for the mother. So I think we have to chase after, both legally and in our society, the upholding of everyone's human rights and never pit a mother against her child or family members against each other, but instead acknowledge that every human being has the same human rights and those need to be protected. And the first human right is life, the right to live. It's the leading cause of death for children. It's the leading cause of death for people in the United States. It's a leading cause of death that beats out cancer. It beats out any other cause of death is abortion. So that's why I'm here. That's why
the leading cause of death for children is gun violence. I mean, that again goes into like personhood and language. Mm-hmm. It's the leading cause of death for. So I mean, abortion is just abortion. To me, it's like a completely separate thing. If we're talking about the leading causes of death in society for children, it's gun violence right now.
So gun violence is a tremendous problem, and there's about 7,000 children, 6 to 7, killed every year because of guns in this country. There's 800,000 children killed every year because of abortions. You don't want to define that a child in the womb is a person, except unless they're 21 weeks old. Is that correct? So they don't get legal protection and a moral status until they are 21 weeks. And that sounds very arbitrary to me. It doesn't sound scientific. It doesn't sound fair. It doesn't sound just. And my understanding of your position is you're about nuance and the gray area, but you're drawing a very black and white line in an arbitrary place and saying because of that line, a child at 19 weeks can be live dismembered in an abortion, and you don't consider that violence, and you don't consider that 19-week-old baby even a person. And my position is saying, I don't think that's loving or just.
If you believe that life begins at conception, then I want to see what you are doing to make sure that no one has to have an abortion that they didn't want to have because of poverty, because of all these other issues that are happening. And that personal moral stance in that case is not as valid to me because it doesn't actually answer any of the questions that are going to help us decrease abortion numbers or even eradicate it if that's your dream.
So I think we have to, if we can keep going, I think we have to get into that conversation about how we help women who are being coerced and support women who are in low-income situations or abusive relationships to make sure that they are not coerced into abortion. I think abortion and coercion go hand in hand. And a lot of the work of the pro-life movement, I'm not sure how familiar you are with it, but is supporting women who are in difficult situations so that they are empowered to not turn to violence and not have to have an abortion, but choose life and protect their children, provide them financial material care, thousands of pregnancy resource centers providing that financial material care, supporting women, giving them the help that they need, connecting them to the resources that they deserve. That's all very crucial. But I do think it's essential to establish a starting point here, because the reality is we're living in a society where abortion is legal, where there are 800,000 children killed by abortion. I know you don't like calling them children, but they're human beings like you and me, and they are just younger and totally defenseless. So it's this ultimate ageism or might makes right, that the more powerful, the born people, are deciding the fate of these preborn people. And so you don't like calling them persons, I know as well as from what you said. So I do think I would like to understand your position. You're saying personhood only starts at 21 weeks because of viability, if I understand. You're saying my position is that you can take a personhood label and put it on a human or take it off. And the history of human rights abuses have been when human beings have been called less than human. They've been called, you're not a person, you're a non-person because you're Jewish. You're a non-person because you're a person of color. You're a non-person because you have a disability. That's the history of human rights abusers. And so I say, if you're a human, you are a person. There's not a question of separating the two. To be human is enough. And the science is conclusive. It's not a matter of my religious belief or faith or some other personal preference I have or you might have. The science is conclusive when human life begins. And a unique individual human life begins at the moment of fertilization.
Is it immoral to force teens and women to give birth against their will? What about bodily autonomy?
I'm completely in support of bodily autonomy, the idea, and I think it's a truth that we have the right to our bodies in the sense that the possession of them, and nobody has the right to harm us or hurt us. And we have the responsibility, along with that right, to not harm or hurt somebody else. And so in the case of a woman who is pregnant or a very young woman who is pregnant, she's pregnant with another, is that another human life? Is that another small little human being in there? And it is. The science is very clear. This is not something we can kind of create nuance where there's not. It's crystal clear. When there's an abortion, it's being done to destroy, it's designed to destroy that embryo or that developing child, because if it doesn't do that, the pregnancy will continue and the child may be carried to term. So the abortion is designed to end a life. That's what abortionists do. They end a heartbeat. That's how they know the abortion has been completed. They have to take the body parts, this is graphic, but take the body parts after the abortion procedure to confirm that they have all the body parts removed of that developing baby. And then they know it's done. Or if the body parts aren't there, maybe it's not done. And there are actually missed abortions where sometimes a woman can go in for an abortion and they don't complete the abortion and she still has a heartbeat afterwards. That baby is still alive. So she has to go back to get the abortion completed. The job of the abortionist is to kill. So back to the question that you asked, Ellen, reproduction has already taken place. In a pregnancy, there are two people, and both deserve care and support, and that is the pro-life position. You're saying showing images of abortion is violence, and if I understood you correctly. And
I was showing those violent images.
Yeah. So it's very hard to understand how you can say that the image is violent, but the act is not violent. How you can say that it's worse for someone to have to grapple with the fact that abortion is violence and that the child had to endure that violence. Because that is a child that was torn apart that should have had the chance to live. And that's why I'm pro-life, that's why I'm here. And so we can spend a lot of time circling the wagons and say, well, what about, poor me, I'm an adult who survived birth, I'm living, I'm in this world, and I have to put up with learning about how babies are killed in abortion. Not poor us, we have a responsibility then to do something to lower the abortion rate, to help those children and to help their mothers. As long as we are actively as a society, not just legalizing abortionists to go out there and profit from killing children, dismembering them, suctioning them to death, having them poisoned to death. And as long as it's even being paid for by the state in many cases, like here in California, that's the bloodshed. That's the biggest human rights abuse in our society today. So we need more voices on that. We need more people fighting that. And until we can agree to finally stop that violence, it's going to be hard to make the progress we need to make on the other issues. We are making that progress. I mean, Live Action is for child tax credit and working to support pregnancy resource centers, get them more of the support that they need so that they can help more families. But there's bloodshed happening today in our cities, and we need to come together to stop that. So just to understand, you're okay with an abortion, like in a live dismemberment abortion. You would be okay to dismember that baby provided it was injected into the heart with a substance that is actually used for lethal injections in execution, state executions. You would be okay with piercing that baby's soft body tissue into the heart with a substance that stops his or her heart, and then after the heart hopefully has stopped beating, then it's okay to start the dismemberment process. That's okay with you, but it's not okay if the injection hasn't been done first. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that sounds like the more humane way to do it.
So are you opposed to the death penalty?
Yes, but then
how can you support giving a lethal injection to a developing baby when
Because-
you're opposed to giving it to even a prisoner who's been tried in a court of law for heinous crimes?
The violent images that aren't being shown are babies riddled with assault rifle bullets, or
I'm opposed to that, Brenda. I don't know if you how you think of my position, but I think that it's horrific, the violence against school children and children in our country and what guns are used for. I think it is horrific. It's mind-numbingly horrific. So we agree on that. I'm talking about the baby that you just said you were okay with being killed in the second trimester as long as its body is pierced with a needle and its heart is injected with a substance that gives us a heart attack, and then it's okay to dismember that baby and remove the baby from the mother. I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to understand how you're okay with that. You believe life begins at a different time than I believe. And what I'm saying is, it's not a question of our belief when human life begins. That's a scientific fact. It begins at fertilization. You can open any biology textbook and it will tell you when a unique individual human life begins. Now you're adding an additional layer of qualification, personhood. You're saying, well, that's a philosophical, I think is what you're saying. You're saying, well, that's a philosophical question. So the science might be clear when a human life begins, but it's not clear philosophically when personhood begins. And so you're saying it might be a human life, but it's not a person yet. Am I representing you correctly? Because it's clear when you're pregnant with something. What are you pregnant with?
yeah, a spirit.
So now it's a spirit?
Well, these are, again, like I really...
But are you okay with killing a spirit then?
I believe that energy moves. I don't think you can kill a spirit.
When you're pregnant, what are you pregnant with? Biologically speaking.
I am going to honestly veto this question.
You won't say when human life begins, although science is clear on that, but you're saying that any abortion for any reason is okay up until what exact marker?
I guess 21 weeks or so.
Okay.
And I would love for that to go way down.
But 20 weeks, it doesn't matter how the baby's killed. It doesn't matter what happens. That baby at 20 weeks is not...
No, I already told you. It has to be done in a humane
way. Why, if it's not a person, if it's not a human life even, as you say, why does it matter?
Because we're all human beings.
But you just said it's not a human being. Do we think that these are human lives or not? Because if they're not human lives and you can persuade me of that, I'm done. You know, it's like I've devoted my life to this because this is a human rights issue for our most vulnerable members of our human family.
But me challenging
and
like
the science
viability, or when it's like I get the impression, if I'm not mistaken, that I'm not going to be able to make any headway with that because you are convinced that life begins at conception.
Well, I think because you're running into facts. You're running into scientific facts that you can't talk away. And the scientific fact is that we don't choose or believe when human life begins. It begins biologically at the moment of fertilization. That's what in an in vitro fertilization clinic, they're looking when they say, oh, we created you 7 embryos. It's that moment of sperm egg fusion when you have a single cell zygote come into existence, and then the in vitro specialist can tell the parents, the would-be parents, oh, we've got you 7 viable embryos, or whatever they say, do you want to implant these? It's because these are individual children of those parents, and they can decide if they're going to carry them to term, right? That's the whole IVF industry in our country. It should not be a debate. But I think it becomes sort of political in a strange way, and even like a religious thing if it's saying, well, it's a debate. The science is clear. Are you opposed to child abuse?
Of course.
Would you say that the circumstances in which children are abused, or not even abused, neglected, which is a form of abuse, but in the circumstances around child neglect are complex?
No. Well, I mean, yeah, the circumstances that get people there, mental health, all of it.
And some neglectful parents are victims themselves of their own addictions or their own childhood abuse cycles or other intergenerational trauma, right?
Yeah.
So, but that child who's still a victim of neglect still deserves to be cared for, right? And even intervened in that situation of the neglect that they're in, if it's severe neglect, to protect that child's life, right? Even though there's complexity all around the parents and the mother and everything else. Yes.
But you're saying that...
Because I agree with you on, Brenda, I agree with you on complexity. We're in agreement there. But what is black and white is life or death. So you're saying it's better for a foster care child to not exist? To not be alive. It's better for them to be killed.
Well, I'm a pro reproductive rights activist, so yes.
So you're saying that a child in foster care, it's better for them to be dead.
Not after they're already alive. Not after
But
they're out of the room.
in order to abort someone, they have to be alive. Otherwise, you don't need to abort them.
My first question to you, though, Lila, is what is your position on abortion when it comes to the horrific instances of rape or incest, or when there's an extreme health risk to the mother? So often, a lot of times when people talk about abortion, it is, and like being pro-choice is like, well, how could you limit that for women who have extreme health risks? How do you respond to that?
Rape and incest are horrific, and a survivor of sexual violence deserves all the support and care, counseling, supportive people around her. We need to be much more aggressive about prosecuting and holding abusers accountable, because there's a lot of abuse running rampant in our society, and abusers who are not held accountable. If a baby is conceived, there's an innocent third party now. There's another human life there. And so the solution to sexual violence can never be homicide, can never be taking out the penalty for the crime onto the child. I mean, that's this myth of generational sin, that the myth of generational sin in the terms of consequence, that because your father was a rapist, then you should bear his penalty, or you should bear a penalty and be killed for it. You don't deserve to live. You're less than human. So I think that in that situation, they deserve the care and support. Survivors deserve care and support, but the solution can never be to kill that child.
And what about the extreme health risk of the mother?
For extreme health risk of the mother, I mean, there's a common misconception in the abortion debate, promoted by the pro-abortion side, that abortions are medically necessary, that you need to intentionally end the life of that child in order to somehow provide medical care for the mother. And I work with thousands of medical professionals who say adamantly, no, we can care for them both, and we should. And if we want to improve maternal mortality rates, if we want to improve the condition of pregnant women in this country, we will not turn to knee-jerk having an abortion, end the pregnancy, kill the baby anytime there's a health issue or crisis. We need to work on addressing what are the underlying conditions that woman might have that is making her pregnancy more difficult. How do we accompany her and have the right checkups and routines in place to ensure that we're catching something in time? There's a lot you can do in the medical process that doctors do, pro-life doctors, to care for both patients, and that's what I would advocate for.
You know, I've seen stories where women are saying, I got pregnant, I wanted to have this baby, but I had to have an abortion because of specific medical issues, not saying necessarily just, the child had a fetal abnormality or anything like that, but maybe health risk of the mother. Can you explain your position on that? And let's see how you feel about that, if there's any common ground.
As just an example, Dr. Anthony Levatino, who is one of the medical professionals that we work with, he was one of the ones who was behind our first abortion procedure series, explaining what happens during the abortion procedure. He worked at a high-risk facility in Upper New York for many years, treating tens of thousands of patients. And he said in his entire time treating high-risk pregnancy, so he was a specialty doctor to go to my clinic to do that, he never had to use abortion to resolve the medical emergency or make the pregnancy or the mother healthier in some way.